Good evening and welcome to this Portugal Calling webinar from Expats Portugal. This is going to be great tonight. Moving to Portugal, don't get ripped off or fall victim to con artists. Real life stories tonight. We have quite the lineup of people with real life case studies, testimonials for you. Before we get underway and talk to people who've had a variety of experiences, it has to be said, moving to Portugal and starting their life here, let's have a quick word from Astrid from Expats Portugal team to talk about the inspiration for this tonight and what you can do about it as well, Astrid. There's a little device in Portuguese culture, isn't there, that people might like to know about?
Yeah, thank you, Carl. This is the first time we've done a webinar of this kind, but Jerry and I thought it would be definitely worth doing after we've heard some horror stories from some of our audience of their experiences with engaging in some businesses, not all of them, but some businesses that are obviously being paid for a service but not delivering. I guess with the popularity of moving to Portugal on the rise, there are going to be some companies out there that don't have the experience in the areas that they say that they do, or overpromise and underdeliver. And we just want to bring some of the case studies to the attention of our audience so that you don't make the same mistake that we hear is happening out there. So I just, in relation to if you are dealing with any Portuguese company and you're having any troubles with it, ask for the complaints book. It's a registered and it's a non-negotiable, definitely have to have procedure book that every company in Portugal has to have. And if you do put a complaint in their complaints book because you're unhappy with the service that you're getting, then that complaint goes to the Ombudsman and it's taken very, very seriously. So sometimes just a threat to write in the complaints book is enough to get the ball rolling in solving your problem. But everyone has to have one. We've got one here at Expats Portugal as well. And even if you're dealing with online companies, they need to display that the complaints book on their website. So definitely follow that. But yeah, I'm interested to hear some of the stories tonight, Carl. And then at the end, we'll give you some ideas on how to stop being ripped off or making sure that you find the right professionals when you're dealing with.
Tremendous. Thank you, Astrid. That's great. And I believe the Portuguese term for the complaints book is the livro de reclamações. And I hope my pronunciation is okay with that. Occasionally, you do see I think it's a sort of satirical thing, but it's a livro of compliments as well that you can. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about moving to Portugal, not getting ripped off, not falling prey to con artists. And we've got a great panel lined up for you. I just want to point out that we want to make you aware of the difficulties that can be encountered when engaging with service suppliers in Portugal. And it might be that some of the problems arise through cultural differences as well as a lack of professionalism. So not necessarily all ill will, but there are cultural differences as well. So tonight we have for you Dwight and Gail, who will talk of their experience of working with a buyer's agent. We've got Amit, who has a story to tell about working with a car dealer, which is, I guess, one of those classics from around the world, isn't it? Working with car dealers, but we have a Portuguese instance of that. We have Jackie talking about her experience working with an estate agent. Jerry with a lawyer, a costly episode that was. And we'll come back to Astrid again, as she said there, to sum up and put you on the right track after hearing of some of the difficulties that people have been facing. So good evening to you, Dwight and Gail. Lovely to have you here. Could you tell us just very briefly where you are in the world and where you are in your process of moving to Portugal, if you will?
Sure. We're in New Mexico right now, about a little between Santa Fe and close to Albuquerque. And we're moving to the central area, we're now 90 days post application of our VFS visa, and looking to put our house on the market as soon as we have notice of this so that we can proceed and have an idea of how to plan the rest of our departure.
Amazing. And already in this, some way into the process, you've encountered a difficult situation with a buyer's agent. I should also say tonight, we won't be naming any companies or individuals. That wouldn't be fair. We are speaking of this situation and these situations so that you don't make the same mistakes and people, wouldn't have the right to reply and so on. So it's depersonalized, but still very interesting to find out what's gone on for people. And for you, a difficulty with a buyer's agent. So could you tell us the story? Oh, we seem to be frozen up in New Mexico. Oh, there you're back again. We've got you again. I'm not sure if you heard my question there, Dwight.
No, I missed the last.
Yeah, if you could tell us about what went on with the buyer's agent experience that you had.
And say it again, Carl.
Okay, let's just check that we've got a good connection. Are you hearing us okay? Live from Portugal tonight. Okay, yeah, I was wondering what went on with you and the buyer's agent, the first of our case studies tonight. So would you mind telling us about your experience?
Sure. As a preamble, I should probably point out that neither of us have bought a home in the last 40 years. So not only lack of experience, but a different culture made us wonder through this entire process, what was the norm, and were we experiencing the norm or some kind of outlier in the way things work? We started off by having a video interview with our buyer's agent, and he, as most people do, gave us a questionnaire to fill out. We filled it out, sent it to him. And it seemed like he totally disregarded the information in that questionnaire and started pushing us toward a house that he thought was great for us, which was way off, away from the coast, away from central. Actually, it was in the northeastern part of the country. It was beyond our budget, and we actually didn't even like the house that much. And it took us a long time to convince him that we were not the ones for that house. So in the process of trying to explain to him what we did like, we steered him toward a house that Gail found on Idealista that both of us just adored. And so he got the idea. We went there, and fast forwarding through the story, we asked him to show us the house. So he did. And I think right after that, he asked us for money because he was dealing with a seller's agent who was a RE/MAX agent. And if you don't know, RE/MAX has a 70-30 split of commission now with buyer's agents. So they kind of leave the buyer's agents on the short side of the deal. So to make up for that, he asked for a cash contribution, to which we very quickly refused, pointing out that he wouldn't have that much work to do with us, because if we successfully negotiated on this house, we'd be finished, and he doesn't have to cart us around showing other properties. So that was one place we had no idea whether this was normal or not. Were we supposed to respond positively to this request? And we were just playing it by ear. We asked some friends, we asked Jerry, is this normal? And so we had to move on from that and just hope we weren't losing him as someone who could work on our behalf. When it came down to negotiating a price, he encouraged us that because of cultural differences, here it is, that the Portuguese pride possibly would refuse to negotiate with us if our starting offer was perceived as being a low ball or just too low for the house. And that turned out not to be the case, because we did start with a fairly low offer compared to the asking price, and the negotiations went fine. He also offered us his attorney to save money, because we told him we were working with Daniel and his associates at his firm. And I tried to gracefully explain that we prefer to have an independent company looking at the deals and the paperwork and having an unbiased opinion, and they'd be working for us and not have split loyalties between having some real estate company to represent as well as us. So we wanted to have an appraisal and an inspection, and this is normal in the US. You know what the house is worth going into it. If you have an inspector come through, you know what dangers lie in that house in terms of maintenance, in terms of problems, leaky roofs, leaky pipes, etc. And the seller basically said, no, we're not going to do either of those. We're going to negotiate a price, and then we can have this happen, this look-see by the appraiser and or the inspector, and then we'll renegotiate the price. And our agent supported that notion. And we thought it sounded ridiculous and we found out later that as you approach the contract or CPCV, there is no going back. Once you sign that contract, everything's set. You can't do anything except back.
Can I just say there, Dwight, that's the promissory note, isn't it? And you're committing 10% of the total there.
You would lose.
Exactly, which you would lose in the event of something going wrong here. On the other hand, you do get double that back if the seller turns their back on you. But anyway, I'm shocked. Please continue.
So after the appraisal, we knew roughly what the market value was because we insisted on the appraisal. Right. And the seller finally relented and said, okay, but no inspection, which did raise suspicions within us as to why no inspection. And after the appraisal, which was done very professionally by a guy who spoke great English that Gail found, we made our initial offer, and we had to coach our agent, and I put quotes around agent because it turns out he was not a real estate agent, he was a business consultant. But evidently almost anyone in Portugal can bring you to a property and act on your behalf to buy it. So after the appraisal, we wanted to make an initial offer. And when our agent went and talked to the Remax agent, he was kind of complaining that, this was kind of a little bit of a stretch. And we had to coach him. We were actually driving to the spa.
I was coaching.
We had to coach him like, no, you got to tell him this, and you got to tell him that the square meters were wrong, and you got to tell him that, and just really, go in there and do a great job. And it seemed kind of ridiculous because that's his job, is to represent us and get the best price that he could for us.
I think I asked him, who are you working for? Are you working for us? Or are you working for the sellers just to get the commission quickly?
Yeah.
So he seemed to be supporting the seller at that point. And so there was another fly in the ointment, and that was that somewhere during this process, the seller disclosed to us that the property had an illegal annex or outbuilding, as we call them in the States, on the property. It was a little workshop and garden shop area that had not been approved by the municipality. And in Portuguese law, I believe that if you have any part of the property that is illegal, it makes the whole property illegal. And it makes life miserable for you if you want to own that property or want to, heaven forbid, resell it. Right. It can just completely pull that down. So Daniel's firm helped us out incredibly by putting into the contract that the seller would see to the legalization of that building as part of the contract, even though it may take longer than the contract period. And it helped us negotiate a really good price because Daniel figured out how much to discount the offer if they didn't take it. They didn't take this legalization process. And it's happening right now. We've since bought the property, and the legalization process is still continuing. And we think it's this part of the CPCV or contract has saved us money and just may have paid Daniel and his associates fees.
Well, that's I'm so glad to hear that you have a positive outcome there, that it turned around for the best. Yeah, I mean, it reeks, doesn't it, of somebody supposedly representing you, the buyer's agent, but as it turns out, working for the seller or working in cahoots with those representing the seller. What an awful process. Now, what's interesting, if I may ask you, sorry, Gail, go on, go ahead.
On that vein, it's like, what did we learn about this that we would share with other people?
Right.
Because you've got to feel comfortable with who's working with you.
Yes.
We didn't know, are we stuck with this person? Are we allowed to fire them? We didn't sign a contract.
Yeah.
A lot of people can be real estate, I say, quote, agents, if the agency carries the licensing, not the individual. And it turned out this individual did not have the licensing. He had a lot of contracting background. He seemed like a very trustworthy. We're not saying he was doing anything untrustworthy, but his alliances seemed to be more about getting his commission than listening to us and what we wanted and being firm. And so I think being firm in what you need to know before you buy a property, so you can negotiate fully and know what your costs are going to be, any repairs. We're going to have to replace a heating system and all that, but we can go into that now with new knowledge of something that's going to be energy efficient. We weren't told many different things, and not being able to have a home inspection, and I worked with a home inspection company for nearly 8 years, is imperative. So we did find, or I did find, a qualified, professional, European licensed and certified appraiser who was also he had building and contracting experience. So we could trust the appraisal we had and know that despite certain things needing to be done with the systems of the house, the bones of the house were good order. It was a good house, and we could move forward with that.
What we still don't know to this day is we were told a lot of myths about Portuguese culture and how it affects the purchasing of a home.
Yeah.
We don't know if any of those are true, but we were certainly told them, and they haven't been discounted by anyone, because we don't know who or what is the authority when it comes to these things. And we're still not sure whether this guy had any con artist intentions or whether he was just incompetent.
Well, let me segue there then. That's where Daniel's firm came in, because we were leaving and we were signing over power of attorney, or Dwight was, since he is the official owner of the home. And anything that they would need to sign on his behalf or potentially for mine, that they could do that. We saw them 2 days before we left, after we were at almost final negotiations. And our agent sent over an email where the seller and the seller agent had supposedly agreed to our price, the conditions, and everything. What we found out when I showed this email to Daniel, and he was working with us over several hours to get all of this done. For about 3 hours, we were there at their office. He immediately saw the email from the seller agent, said this is illegal. And what Carl brought up was, if you have a contract, the buyer, if they back out for certain reasons, is, unless they're designated in there, we put in there, if something happened to Dwight between when we negotiated the house and we closed, he died or something happened, then the deal was off. And that was in there because we're not married, and that protected me and allowed me to get our earnest money back and figure out what I would do. So he did include that in there. And so you want to make sure there's clauses. But
thank goodness for Daniel's diligence there. Sorry, Gail.
Daniel saw that the terms were illegal, and it allowed the seller to continue showing the house and get a higher price.
Yeah.
And we were bound by the 10%. And he immediately said within 30 seconds, this is illegal. This is not quality wording. Our agent never saw that. He still doesn't know. I will be writing an email to let him know why we won't be referring him. But Daniel earned his money and more in everything they've done for their fee, and seeing this right away and taking care of the legalization. So I think having your own representation of someone looking out after you, your interests, making sure the property's legal, everything is legal, is going to cover you and be well worth it.
Well said. Okay, we need to move on. We could have a whole webinar on your just this case. Quite frankly, it's astounding, and we have other people with contributions here. We will come back to you. I'm sure people will have questions for you. Thank goodness for Daniel there of Raisin Pelicano, who you can find in the Expats Portugal Business Directory. You've seen him on the screen with me as well in the webinars. An extraordinary fellow, and some great work there for Gail and Dwight. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that you had to use so much trust and goodwill working at that distance rather than confidence. I mean, when you employ people, you want to use confidence, not trust and faith, don't you? And goodwill and those sorts of things, and superstition and prayers. You know, you hire a professional for a reason. So I'm sorry it was like that for you. We will return to you. Thank you for sharing that. It's extraordinary, and good luck, boa sorte, with how that all turns out for you. Thank you so much so far. On this webinar, moving to Portugal, don't get ripped off or fall victim to con artists. We move on to Amit now. Amit, good evening to you. I'm hoping, like, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, we're now talking about a car dealer. What happened with you, Amit?
Okay, so I'll preface this segment with I did not run into incompetence. I did not run into dishonesty. I have not run into any really negative sort of individual elements, right? They were all professionals, they all meant well and everything else. So mine is a bit more of a story of the differences, some cultural, some just style, I think, of how buying a car worked for me for the last 40 years in the US versus here in Portugal.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that preface. It's very important and thank you for that distinction. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and even now, so for example, you know, even once we do pick up the car, I would be happy to recommend the dealer and the gentleman we've dealt with and all of that. So that's not a problem. It's just kind of a perfect storm of situations, and I think, you know, it might help somebody. It may not. In fact, you know, a couple of friends of ours who also bought a car around the same time, they went to the Volkswagen dealer, they found the car they wanted on the lot, they bought it, and they were done, you know, done and dusted in less than 2 days, I think, the whole thing.
Right. But what happened to you?
Well, so first of all, I picked a car that wasn't easily available, right? I picked a Mach-E EV from Ford. And so there was a backlog, and, you know, but we were looking at different cars. We actually went to an ACP event, which was really cool. They let us drive a whole bunch of them. We tried out the Mustang Mach-E and liked it. You know, good comfort, good space in the back, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't meet Jerry's standards. Obviously, it's not a Tesla, but yeah, it is what it is, right? So after, you know, checking out a couple of other details, we settled on it. We talked to the dealer who had actually taken us on our test drive because we liked him. He seemed to know the car. And so they have a dealership locally. And so, you know, we said, well, how do we go about this? So we said, well, come see us at the dealership, and, you know, we'll get you all set up. But the process is basically online. So Ford, like a lot of others, have gone to an online ordering process where you pick up from the dealer, but you do all the initial work online. So we got a little bit more information that we wanted, settled on the model, etc., ordered online, and this was in May. So we had met him originally in April. So by May, we had settled on it. There was a 2-month wait. We ordered, and then the wait began, right? So it'll first get shipped to Holland, and then it'll get shipped to Portugal, and you'll get updates on where the car is. Well, there weren't a lot of updates, but anyway, as it got closer, we started saying, hey, let's do the paperwork. And so the reason for the perfect storm in this case is that I wasn't buying the car as an individual. I was buying it for my company.
Right.
right? Because you get a big rebate if you buy a car for a business, an EV. You get the entire value-added tax refunded, which,
Yes, in
for those of
Portugal,
you who
20,
don't know, is
23%. Yeah.
that's a 23% discount essentially on
Yes.
the car.
Yeah.
So it was worth it. So, but anyway, so that kind of got us into this a bit of a do loop, as software people would say, where we were going in circles a bit. Okay, we need this from the company. Oh, the company hasn't been in business in Portugal for very long. So now we need all the paperwork from the American company that it's a subsidiary of, and on and on. But I think so we are about to pick up the car. We were gone for 3 weeks in Germany. So the reason we don't have it now is entirely ours.
Right.
But we could have picked it up 3 weeks ago if all the paperwork had worked out. But so another funny story about the paperwork. So we're all set. This is late August. We know we're going to leave. So we told them, we need to get this done quickly. So they said, oh, we have to get this contract notarized. And so, once you come here, take the paperwork, go to the notary, get it notarized, come back. We said, well, we don't have a car. So,
Yeah, obviously.
even a 3 kilometer, notary public walk can take us half a day. So we'll meet you at the notary public. So this, didn't occur to them. But so we met them at the notary public. The notary public says, oh, wait, do you both speak Portuguese? And we said, no. Well, do you read and understand Portuguese? I said, kind of. She said, oh, then you can't sign these papers. You have to have you have to have a translator. Now, again, it's a good idea.
Of course it is.
Right? But the unfortunate thing was the dealership didn't know about this requirement. And probably because they had never dealt with someone who doesn't speak Portuguese, right? So I was, kind of a test case for them.
Why did you have to have it notarized? What was the reason?
I think because it was on behalf of the company.
Oh, because you're a company buying from
right.
All right, yeah.
Right. So they wanted our signatures notarized, and anyway. So, and then she turned to him, and so he said, "I speak English and Portuguese. I can explain it to them." He said, "Oh no, you're wearing a Ford dealer T-shirt. So
conflict of
you're
interest.
not independent.
Right,
I can't let you be the translator." So off we had to go find somebody. We actually found a very friendly security guard who works in our complex and speaks fluent English. Went back the next day, signed the paperwork, and so forth. So, sort of the short part of the story is that it works differently here, number one.
Yep.
Number two, you will get unexpected hiccups, just because either they're not used to what you represent, as in they're a foreign buyer or somebody who doesn't speak Portuguese and understand it, or, in our case, the complication was the business aspect of it. But any or all of those can kind of conspire together against you.
Giving
so
you
have to.
Yeah, a total waiting time of how long did you say? May when you or April?
Yeah. So we ordered in May and it's now September.
My goodness,
Right.
You'll be really happy to see that car when it comes, won't you?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yeah. Petra keeps saying it'll be old by the time we get it, but
that's true. It might have depreciated. I mean, okay, let's not go into that right now. But
no.
Did the security guard go with you to
yeah? So luckily it was his day off the next day, so we went back the next day, got the paperwork signed, and then the day before we were about to leave for Germany, they said, "Oh, we need another piece of information from your bank in the US." So at that point, we said, "Okay, this is not happening. I'll get you the information, but it'll be coming in a day when I land in Germany because I can't get it done right now. But anyway, it's still, it was summer vacations that held up things. It was, the bank, in this case, it's a Ford lease. And so the bank that's financing the lease that they have a deal with was pretty skittish, I guess. And, so they wanted all kinds of extra. But again, in defense of the dealer, the bank imposed this last minute insurance thing where they wanted to insure the deal, essentially, that if somehow we stopped paying, the insurance company would pay out. And the Ford dealer, without me asking for it, discounted the price of the car to cover the cost of the insurance.
Wow.
And so you can see this is, they mean well.
Yes.
Right? And so I don't think it's fair for us to judge them by the standards we are used to or by the process that we are used to.
Yes.
But again, it doesn't change the fact, obviously, that it can take much longer. In the US, even if you have to order a special order a car, the day it arrives, typically they'll spend that day cleaning it up and getting it ready for delivery. But they wouldn't let you wait more than a day to pick up the car because they want the money as soon as they can. And, Jerry and I were talking about this. This is not a money-driven culture. So these kinds of things just kind of take their own time, and you just have to be prepared for it.
What an amazing story to share with us there. And thank you for your fairness in making that really clear. It's a cultural difference, which has put you in that perfect storm, as you put it, in the do loop. Is that was that the expression you used? What a nightmare, basically, though. A pesadelo in Portuguese. That is quite something, and a really good example of don't bring your own expectations, your own cultural expectations, and expecting them to work, and maybe do like Amit's friends did, which is probably the safest thing to do, is to buy something they've got in stock, right, and pick it off the lot. Okay.
Yeah, that was, they're still laughing at us, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, they won't get a lift in the new EV, will they? Okay. Thank you, Amit, so much for being here tonight and sharing that with us. Did you want to add something else?
No, that was it. Again, if I had bought it on my own, I don't think I would be here reciting this story. So it's, you just have to watch out for this kind of things, things that come out of left field, as the Americans say. So
well, thank you for that. And I think we will have questions for you as well as Gail and Dwight, because the theme continues now. I think this is part of what Jackie's going to tell us now, working with a real estate agent. Jackie, are you there? And did you come bringing some expectations that didn't quite turn out as you might have expected?
Carl, we talked about this. And remember, we talked about all the assumptions we made when we came to this country.
Yes.
And so, yes, I did make all those assumptions. And I really, really understand Dwight. And is it Gail? I'm sorry.
Right.
Gail.
Yeah.
My experience was not half as dramatic, but there were a lot of takeaways from it, like were for Gail and Dwight. The first thing I came to realize is the consumer protections just don't exist here. Not to the same degree they exist in the US or the UK. So if you just start off understanding that as kind of a baseline, you'll have a better sense of how to navigate real estate. The second thing, because consumer protections don't exist to the same degree, for instance, like Dwight and Gail had the experience of, a real estate agent doesn't have to be licensed in this country. That's not part of what a real estate, it's just not the law here. So those are some of the things you have to think about. The other thing is, for me, I bought an apartment, of course, during the pandemic when everything was so complicated. But in the US, when you get a bank loan, that house that you purchase belongs to the bank until that very last payment. And if you miss payments, they will sell that house or apartment. in this country, they don't operate the same way. That's why they get insurance. They say they're not in the business of selling homes. So one of the things that happens is that you buy a home, in the US, what they insist on doing is getting an inspection because it belongs to the bank and the bank's putting the money up.
Yes.
They don't have inspections here. And for instance, the seller is not legally obligated to tell you anything that's wrong with what they're selling you, with the apartment or the house. In the US, even if there was a suicide in that home, they have to disclose everything. So that's not the law here. So we were really surprised when we were like, wait, how come they never told us that our fireplace doesn't work? They're not legally obligated.
Yeah.
Again, there's not the same consumer protection. So I thought my real estate agent for Portugal was a good one, but she did not have to. She was working for the seller. She wasn't working for me. And so how does that manifest? Well, it manifests, I did a low ball offer. She never encouraged me. She just shrugged her shoulders. After they accepted it, she goes, well, I'm not surprised they accepted it. I said, why is that? She goes, because they were thinking they're from Porto, and they thought they were asking too much for the apartment. And I said, you never were going to tell me that? She goes, no, she was never going to tell me that. And that would have informed, what kind of offer I would have made, but she wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the things you really have to think about. Like, you want to put all the protections, like, hiring Daniel or a great lawyer or a great surveyor, or doing all the things that Dwight and Gail did, was basically put in place those same protections.
Yes.
That don't exist here. So they're not dishonest. It's just a different system.
And you really do have to check your assumptions.
And that was the tough thing, because I use a multinational. I used Remax, and I thought,
well, yes, because that's an interesting point you make there, Jackie, that part of branding is to make sure you get the same Big Mac, as I understand it, or Coca-Cola, whether you're in Moscow, Washington, or Lisbon. When it comes to Remax, you're not necessarily going to get the same level of service or standardization, are you, across the globe?
well, the laws are different in every country they serve.
Yep.
And so they're following the laws of that country, and those laws are different in Portugal. So I think all the great information that Gail and Dwight told us, which was, make sure you get a surveyor, make sure you do an inspection, because my friend said, my brother's a contractor, he'll come and inspect. My real estate person said, you don't need an inspection. And my friend said, yeah, no, my brother's coming in to check the place out. I was like, okay, these are the things that we started to realize. And I think Dwight and Gail did all the right things in terms of protecting themselves.
Yeah. Well said, Jackie. Anything else to add on your particular personal process there? And does the chimney work now?
No, I've lived here 4 years. Still can't use it.
But you don't have to tell the next person either, remember?
I don't know. I think I'd feel so guilty.
Joking.
I feel so guilty about it. I mean, I am American through and through, and I just feel that I have responsibility to the buyer. It's different.
I'm sure you would tell them. And that's how you've been kind of accustomed, isn't it? Acculturated to do that because of where you've come from and the very expectations that we're talking about tonight that can cause the pain. Jackie, thank you so much for that. For everybody who just needs to adjust their raised eyebrows or dropped jaw, you can do that now. You can push your jaw back to where it should be and bring your eyebrows down a little bit. We're going to hear from Jerry in just a moment about a legal situation working with a lawyer. Just want to say, and I should have done this before, but thank you everybody who's checked in tonight. Barack in Texas, Denise in the wilderness of South Africa, Laura, good evening to you, Patrick. People checking in from all over the world tonight. Thank you so much for your messages. Let's go to Jerry now then with this a horror story from the legal world. And again, you just didn't know any better, did you, Jerry?
No, not at all, Carl. I'm going to tell everyone my experience with a lawyer that was recommended to me. I used recommended to me by the sales agent where I bought a house from. and didn't know any better, and again, probably made assumptions and turned out to be incorrect assumptions. But this experience goes back a few years. It's way before I'd even heard of Expats Portugal. And I was actually living in the UK, but bought a home in Portugal. And I needed to have a fiscal representative, and I used the lawyer because he said he could do that for me. So that was fine. When I moved permanently to Portugal in 2015, I applied to register for the NHR tax concession. And at that time, the NHR concession was at 0. So I was applying for a 0 tax for 10 years. My application was rejected because the IRS here said that I was tax resident in Portugal during 2013. That wasn't true. And I could show all my UK tax records for that year, but the IRS stuck to their guns. My tax advisor said I needed to go back to the lawyer and get the declaration that he had made on my behalf in 2013. He stalled and stalled and eventually told me there had been, wait for it, there had been a fire in his office and all records for 2013 had been destroyed. To this day, I don't believe that story. So despite my efforts and the efforts of my tax advisor and 2 other reputable lawyers that I asked to look into this, I've been unable to reverse that decision. So whatever that original lawyer did or didn't do, his actions have cost me thousands in tax that I shouldn't have to pay for a 10-year period. I guess, you know, the first lesson is I wrongly assumed that he's a lawyer, he's a proper lawyer. I checked him out and everything else, and he'd been recommended to me, and I thought I was working with a good person. Now, unfortunately, there's more to say about this chap. I sold that house in 2017 and moved to my present home. 24 hours before the sale was due to be completed, I received a call from the agent to say there was a lien on the house and it couldn't be sold. The lien was due to an unpaid land tax invoice, which was issued in 2014. At that time, all such invoices were going to my fiscal representative, this lawyer. He would tell me I would pay him, and then he would pay the authorities on my behalf. That's how it was working. It turns out, although I paid him, he had never paid the authorities, and so they put a lien on my house. They don't tell you, they just do it, right? Fortunately, it was a relatively small amount. I think it was about 150 euros or something, and I was able to rush to my local finances office, make the payment, and get the lien lifted. But this guy wasn't going to help me out one little bit. And then the final part of this saga involves the actual sale of the house. The lawyer, again, this lawyer had power of attorney for my wife, who could not attend the sale, and so she gave him power of attorney. And he was also still acting as her fiscal representative. When the sale was completed, he insisted on holding 6,000 euros as contingent for capital gains tax. I argued that there would not be any capital gains tax, but as he was holding all the money, he refused to agree with me, and I had no choice but to agree with him.
Wow.
I subsequently declared the sale on my tax return and received confirmation that there was no capital gains tax to pay, and informed him of that. It took me 3 years to get the money back after he gave excuse after excuse. And I was eventually advised by another lawyer, whose name also happens to be Daniel, to write and tell him that if I didn't receive this money within 7 days, I would lodge a complaint with the Portuguese bar. Surprise, surprise, my money arrived the next day. And that's back really to the point Astrid was making earlier. The complaints books are taken seriously, and I expect with a lawyer, a complaint to the bar is taken even seriously.
Right. Yes, yeah.
So that was my experience, and hopefully I've learned from that experience. And you know, but you know, just because they're a lawyer doesn't necessarily mean they're going to comply with everything the way you would expect them to.
Gary, that's what I was going to pick up on. You used the phrase, I think, proper lawyer. And that's the assumption there, isn't it? Or the expectation. Proper lawyer, proper real estate agent, proper car dealer.
Yes.
We have to qualify that term, don't we? We have to understand what that means, what we think it means, and whether that's those thoughts about what that means are transferable into the culture into which we're coming, either through ill will or just cultural differences, as we've said before. Another extraordinary story, Jerry, that cost you dearly. Thank you for sharing that so that others don't have to. And you're like Victor Khayyam in a way, aren't you? Like so impressed. You bought the company, as it were.
I bought the company.
Yes, you now are in a position. If you'd been in this position, you would have known, wouldn't you? But others can now.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. With hindsight, I know all the answers now. Of course, too late. But hindsight. What can you say? But Carl, I have just 3 other short comments I'd like to make from members who couldn't come on tonight.
Yeah, excellent.
And as you know, we now do consultations with a lot of our members and one-to-one meetings and so on. And just a few comments that I picked up on from different people. I'm not going to name names or anything like that. But one member said to me, please warn them away from lawyer XXX. I'm not going to, in Lisbon. This is really interesting. VSF in San Francisco told me she's notorious in their office. Can you imagine that? Unfortunately, we'd already paid her 16,000 euros, and that was for a visa, NIF, and bank account stuff. They're still trying to get that money back. Fortunately, they connected with us, and we put them into EI, and things are moving on for them now. But I think that's an example of, there's such a surge in interest of people wanting to move to Portugal, that there are a lot of people, seizing the opportunity and trying to make gain. And again, a cautionary tale. Another member wrote to me last week, I just arrived back in the US. My visit was productive. I was able to open a bank account and purchase a home. I'm very unhappy with the firm I contracted with. Sorry, his name, I can't name him, to help me with the D7 process. Communication is almost non-existent, and I was informed that all communication must be by email, no phone calls allowed. Can you please put me in contact with the company that Expats Portugal work with? No phone calls allowed.
That goes way against a cultural expectation and probably a human expectation as well, doesn't it?
Yes, and certainly against, and I mean, one of the things we pride ourselves with the companies we work with is the fact that they all give a personal service, and anyone who joins the dream team later will hear them give out their emails or phone numbers or whatever.
Yes.
So there was a company who were so high and mighty, they were too busy to take phone calls.
And no phone call policy. Incredible.
And my final story is about a member who was looking for a builder and an electrician for a house he purchased here. And he was referred to 2 people who were actually expats working in Portugal. Now, this is an interesting thing to be aware of. Both of these contractors were only interested in being paid in cash, and they could not issue certified invoices. Now, this is important because without a certified, if this member was to sell this house, he would have capital gains tax to pay, but he can offset any costs that he put in to improve the house. But he has to have certified invoices to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And the kind of money he was talking about was significant. And in addition to that, this electrician was not authorized to issue an inspection certificate, which is a legal requirement for any electric work to be done in Portugal. And his solution to our member was to find a Portuguese electrician to handle that part. And again, so something again to be wary of. Why wouldn't they issue a certified invoice? Very simply because they're not paying taxes. That's why.
Yeah.
In Expats Portugal, we have to issue certified invoices. Every invoice we issue is recorded. The tax element is recorded and is reported to the government, and has to tie in with our financial returns. And of course, he would hit this problem that he wouldn't be able to offset the cost against any tax that was due later on. So another area to be cautious of. It can be quite attractive. Somebody will quote a price. It'll be less than the full price because for cash, the VAT is not there. It's 23%, and that can be very tempting. But be aware that you won't get a certified invoice, and you wouldn't be able to offset that invoice against costs in the future.
Thank you, Jerry. Is that
Those are just some of the other stories that we're picking up.
Well, and you're hearing so many things, I'm sure, in those consultations, and it's a great idea to have one of those with Jerry and the Expats Portugal team. Thank you very much for your own personal reflection, sharing, Jerry, and sharing those as well. Come back to you in just a moment, Amit. I think we need to kind of conclude this particular part. Your question, Elkaran, about revoking power of attorney, we'll get to that sometime this evening, or maybe on the Dream Team session at 9 if we don't get to that in this session. And I think we'll come back to Astrid in just a moment. But this is a great little insight on human behavior, of course, isn't it? Human nature. Ben says there are bad apples in every profession, no matter what the culture. So it doesn't surprise me to hear these stories about lawyers, real estate agents, contractors. Portugal, of course, isn't perfect. Some of these things are ill will. Jerry referred to the gold rush that's going on, and that I think does attract a few bad apples and people taking advantage of the situation. So of course, Ben, you're absolutely right. There will be bad apples who pop up. However, we have ways of making sure you don't end up necessarily with those people. Isn't that right, Astrid?
Thank you, Carl. It's really interesting hearing all these stories, and it's great to hear some good referrals. I'm actually reading some of the comments too that Gail and Dwight are recommending their surveyor there too. So Jerry, Jackie and I work really, really hard to make sure that we do find companies that you can trust and that you can work and you feel them can work confidently with. They're often coming into the Dream Team session, which I've been promoting here in the chat. So anybody who wants to come and maybe get to know some of these people that we highly recommend in a Dream Team session, feel free to come and join. It starts at 9 o'clock or 9 p.m. here at Lisbon time. But any complaints that we get or any hurdles that we might get with any of our recommended partners, it's brought to our attention by our community, we address straight away, and usually without 100%, the issue is rectified very, very quickly and promptly. So yes, we do work very hard to make sure that we only refer our professional companies to make sure that none of this will happen to any of our audience if they come through from Expats Portugal. So please, it's very important for us that you know that you can trust the people we work with.
Join us then for the Dream Team. And thanks, Astrid, for that. There is a scam going around, apparently, paying deposits before looking at Lisbon apartments, for example, and it turns out they don't even exist. So be very careful parting with your money. Use people where you're getting a word of mouth recommendation. Use people in the Expats Portugal business directory with whom we have great relationships, rather than having to use so much trust, faith, and goodwill. As that first story that was told to us by Gail and Dwight. I mean, that was an awful situation to be in, isn't it? So far from where you want to be, and having to put so much trust in somebody who clearly you couldn't. It would be a struggle to have confidence in that particular person. Gail, did you want to sum that up and add something?
Oh, after you were finished. Well, okay. I think what it did is it caused it's a stressful process anyway.
Yes, right.
Our decision to buy a home instead of an apartment, because we have 4 cats, where we wanted to be, all of those things. Not understanding really in the beginning who to trust. And I would have to say that a lot of our trust was gained through Expat Portugal and listening and connecting with other people, asking as many questions as we could, but still we felt like we were on very, very insecure ground. And so dealing with someone that you feel isn't working with you adds all this extra stress on top of everything else that is required in buying a home. And that really took away, because we had all these, should we be doing this? All these back and forths. And really it was the same, except we knew once we had Daniel's firm taking care of things, at least they were legally bound, as are many. And I've made this comment with the home appraiser I put in and the home inspector, certified and licensed people. There are apparently some ways in which you can have protections because they have a duty. And Mr. Souza, that was the home appraiser, was very clear. He wasn't going to be partial to us. He wasn't going to be partial to the seller. He had a professional duty
Fantastic.
to make an independent appraisal, and he fulfilled that and more. And I think that's where we began to feel, even though we wasn't 100% secure, that we're finding people that we could at least ask questions, get some answers, find out what we were told that was incorrect, and keep validating information, because just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true. Like
Well
we
said.
were told, you can do this later. No, you can't. Once you sign that agreement, you're bound by it unless there's certain clauses put in there by your attorney or whoever's going to do the paperwork for the home. And this is a house you're buying. So
Quite
you've got to make sure
yeah.
everything is in place.
Another thing we didn't understand is if and when, if we wanted to get out of using this agent,
Right.
we
Excellent
would
strategy.
extract ourselves from that
Yes.
relationship and find someone else.
Legally.
And no one could answer that question for us.
Wow.
We-
Okay.
we-
We will continue this conversation. Thank you. After we end the recording here. There's a very interesting question that we'll continue to discuss after I push a stop on the recording from Laura. Do you think that in the last 2 years it has increased bad behavior and these sorts of scams? She's been here since 2017 and doesn't recollect so many as there are now. We'll talk about that. If you want to be here live on the evening when we record the webinars, make sure you sign up at expatsportugal.com and you get priority treatment to come into the webinars. So if you want to be here and have the after recording discussion, make sure you do that. Sign up at expatsportugal.com. Thank you so much, Gail and Dwight, to Amit, to Jackie, to Jerry, to Astrid. We'll continue our discussion now. Thank you all so much for sharing as you've done from your own personal stories there of moving to Portugal and being in Portugal. Thank you for the time being.